All right, so now that you've got the basics of Blender down, hopefully we can proceed on to the first assignment. So the first thing is creating a house model. We're going to be creating something that has at least 4 walls, has to have a roof, a door, at least 3 windows, and then a chimney. By the way, the tutorial does not cover how to make a chimney. That's something that you'll have to do yourself. So this is the Blender 3D Noob to Pro wiki book that we're using for the tutorial. If I go down to the table of contents here, this is a lot of the stuff which has to do with how to alter your interface, what the various keystrokes are, things like that. So kind of the stuff that we talked about in the original video. So the first thing we're going to be doing is this thing, the quickie model, and actually improving your house eventually. So to begin with, we're going to try making this thing here. And this tutorial walks through the instructions on it. So to begin with, it says launch Blender, do the basics, and that's what we've had in the first place. Notice that it's got these number 3, num 5, and those sorts of things as little buttons. Number 3 means that it is the keypad 3. It's not the 3 up at the top of the keyboard. It's on the right side over with the other number pads. Make sure that you have the number lock on when you do that, so the little light should be on for the number lock. Also notice that there are things like control space, tab, and if you see LMB or RMB or MMB, so like down here, shift RMB, that means shift and the right mouse button, or middle mouse button, which is the scroll wheel, or LMB is left mouse button. So to begin with, we're going to start with adjusting the height of this thing. We're going to make it a little bit taller by selecting these points up at the top. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm currently in object mode, so I need to switch to edit mode. I need to select these points here. So I just right click there, hold down shift, right click again, and again, and again. So now I have all 4 points. And if we're going to adjust the size of it, we're going to be translating it. And you can use the arrows, or you can just press the letter G and it'll switch into grab mode. So now I can say G, which means I can move it in all sorts of different directions, but I want to make sure that it stays in just the Z direction. So after I press G, I can then press Z and it will stay in just the Z axis. So I could do G for grab and then Y if I wanted to move only in the Y axis, or X. So usually what you want to do with these sorts of things is you can adjust the points in a particular axis by doing whatever the action is, grab. You can also do S for scale or R for rotate, and then the axis, so X, Y, or Z, and then it'll allow you to alter where you're going. If you don't like this, you can always hit escape, and it'll cancel whatever the most recent action is, and Control Z will let you undo things as well. So if I grab this and I'm like, oh no, it's in the wrong spot, Control Z will let me go back. So I am going to grab in just the Z direction, so that a G then Z, and then move it down a little bit so that it is more house-like. And by the way, if you want it to be exact, if I'm in U7, 1, or 3, I can look directly on. Also, I'm in perspective mode right now, so notice this line is shorter than this front line because it merges to the horizon back here. For a lot of these sorts of things, it's probably easier to actually switch to orthographic, where everything is parallel, and then you can see more exactly, is it exactly lined up. One other thing to note, there is something called occlude background geometry. So it's mentioned right here. What that means is whether or not you're allowed to look through an object and select points on the backside. So for example, if I zoom in, I'm in perspective mode, notice that I can't see the back of this thing. It's behind this front plane, so I can't see it. This button right here occludes background geometry or not. So if I unclick it, notice that now I can select the back side. Sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you only want to select what's visible. So if that's the case, I want to not occlude, well, I want to occlude the background geometry, which basically means only show me the stuff that's visible and only let me click on the stuff that's visible, so I can't accidentally misclick on something back there. All right, so, that was exciting. I've adjusted the height. So another thing that I'd like to do is to make a ceiling. So with this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab those 4 points again, and basically extrude it. So I grab those 4 points, extrude it up a little bit so that I create a new box basically on top of this. So I'm going to grab that point, that point, that point, that point. And then you can either hit the letter E or extrude individual. Well, I'm sorry. Oh. I want this face. I'm sorry. You don't want the points. You want the face in order to extrude it. So if I extrude this, there we go. Then you're able to basically create a new box on top. So I'm going to create that new box. So now what I'd like to do is, I don't want a box. I want to actually take these 4 points and make them one. So now that I've got those 4 selected by switching over to the vertex select, I'm going to merge them all together. So I've just extruded. I hit the left mouse button to confirm that. And now I want to merge. So the W menu brings up the special things you're allowed to do. A lot of those things are also over here on the left side, by the way. So if you can't find it, look there. So for example, here's things that you can merge. If I have these 4 selected and I hit the W, it brings up the specials menu, and it has things like subdivide and merge. Also has other things you can do. Merge will pop up another thing which confirms which thing you want to do. So you can merge them at the cursor, which means all the points end up where this 3D cursor is. If I do W and merge again, I can do collapse, or I can do at center. At center is what I want to do. That puts them all in the very middle of all of those points. So now I have a point on my fantastic house. Cool. That's the basics of it, and it also mentions how to save your work. So it's not a bad idea. Let's go ahead and do that. Save as. I'm going to put it on my desktop. House, maybe I should call it House Galbraith Jason, but that's fine. So now I'm going to save it, and by the way, there it is. And later on I can move that to where I need it. That's actually the end of the first part of the tutorial. They also mention rendering. So rendering is how you actually look through the camera and see how your model looks if you were going to take a picture of it. So let's do that real quick. So if I zoom back out, here's the camera. So I'm roughly going to take that picture, and the lighting will be from here. So the way I do that is I hit the F12, the function 12 key, and there we go. That's what it looks like through the camera. It looks, as you might expect, like a box with a triangle pyramid on top. Well, that's exciting. Later on when we have better scenes, that'll be more useful to us. And when we do animations, the camera position will really matter. So I'm going to hit Escape now to go back into my edit mode. All right. So that's exciting. It talks about how the camera works, field of view, aperture, all that kind of stuff. For most of us, we're not worried too much about it. If you want to, you can play with all the settings in the camera menu, which is this little thing here. So if I expand out this window, there's a lot of settings I can do with the camera. Also, if you don't like the F12 button, this is the button which will allow you to do the rendering as well.